when you're empathic, or you're often, that nervous system sort of takes on the energy of what you're encountering, and then you start confusing it for your own, and then it causes anxiety and stress because your body's going, what's going on? I feel angry, I feel sad. But you don't actually feel angry and sad. You're just processing the angry and sad of all the people around you, and you don't know that you're not. And so I really feel that the nervous system is the organ of our sixth sense. And that's where we're getting the information from. It's taking all of those five senses information, plus it's measuring the energy coming from that which is around us.
Welcome to the Earth Mates podcast. Together, we explore how to find your path from climate anxiety to community action by asking, who are you? Because just like any relationship, that matters. So get ready to be raw and real, but also playful and silly with me, Chief Relationship Officer Amber Peoples, as we discover what's possible through the lens of the 5 Earth archetypes. Curiosity and subscription buttons highly encouraged. Hello, friends. Today, as we record this session, it is a winter day here in the Pacific Northwest. You'll notice that I have this wonderful cozy sweater on. It's actually made by a friend. And so I love that on days like today where it's chilly, I get the opportunity to wear it and think of my friend and feel really connected and cozy to all the bits and pieces that made it so. And I'm wondering, wherever you are, whenever you are listening to this, what is it like for you right now? What is nature connected with you? Is it influencing the way you dress? Is it feeling like an energetic thing? Is it something that is being perceived by your 5 senses, or something a little different? We're going to take a 5-second little moment of pause here and ask you to take the time to tune into it. It might help if you close your eyes, but I will let you decide. And here we begin. Thank you. Now, I'm delighted to introduce you to our embodiment type, Natalie Cutsforth. Natalie and I met about 2 years ago through a mastermind called Impact Accelerators, where we discovered together how to strengthen businesses that have a positive impact on the world. Besides both living in Oregon, we found wonderful layers of our connection between our relationships with the earth. In addition to the lavender farm Natalie cares for, her work as an intuitive healer is very grounded in supporting empaths with the tools that help us be fully present on this planet. I'm delighted to call her my friend and have the opportunity today to explore more deeply how she translates the embodiment type into daily life. So welcome. I'm so delighted to have you here, Natalie. And I'm curious, of this description I just gave, what feels resonant for you and what do you feel might be a slightly different interpretation?
Thank you so much. I am really excited to be here too. And I just wanted to say, yes, it was interesting because when we first met through that program, it was more just like being in a group and hearing each other share our pieces. And so I was reflecting before getting on this conversation with you that actually one of the things I noticed first around getting to know you was that in a situation where there's really successful business people, and you were expressing the basic pieces of your project and your vision around earth conscious education, that it was very difficult for them to actually help you. That they were really struggling to hear you and really know how to help you, that their way of seeing the world was so conditioned on, in a way, sort of like profit, and oriented towards like sales and profit, and this kind of a mindset that it really struggled to look at a service oriented approach to educating and making an impact. So anyways, I learned a lot from that because it took a lot of courage for you to continue to bring your ideas forward and have them continue to be like, well, I don't, like give you advice that didn't really make sense. So that was one thing that was pretty interesting to observe, that we really need to work on that in our society, being able to have conversations about our actual impact on the earth, not just our impact on other people. We're really unskilled at it on a really high level in our society, from even, from leaders to whether they're in politics or business. And that's something where they really need help. We all need help. So, and then the other piece is that you came by my farm and we got to actually see each other in person after sort of an era of so many people just being stuck looking at each other over Zoom. It was really fun to meet in person and realize that we had a lot of connections and synchronicities in terms of Oregon Country Fair and other things like that that we didn't realize when we were in this broader group together. So
Yeah, oh, that's such a fun reflection. I love that. I love that. Just that those really personal pieces is I love that you brought that right to the beginning of the conversation, because that is so key. And so thank you so much for honoring that journey and sharing that it actually really stuck with you and continues to influence how you view the world and watching you go through that process. I feel really honored by that. So thank you.
well,
Yeah.
my pleasure. It's, we're in it together. I had my own, I haven't, what I bring to the world struggled to be seen at times in that environment too, because um, we, when you're in a role where you're offering healing, um, sometimes it doesn't fit the bill of, the business models that we have in our world, the primary ones, I would say. So.
Yeah. So speaking of this gift that you bring to the world, one of the things that is prominent when people connect with you is that you have this invitation, and that invitation is to transform your life and reclaim your vitality to be the best you. Like, wow, that's a lot to imagine and take in. And I wonder for you, what does that look like? Like, how do you live that life on a daily basis? And how do you help others kind of lift up to that place where that resonance feels true and vivacious?
Well, I love to learn and I love to grow. And so I've been sort of compelled my whole life to like self-reflect when I come up upon something within myself that is, I feel, is a limitation or a fear or uncomfortable. And or when I come into a relationship where there's something that's uncomfortable. And so what happened for me is that in my late 20s, I realized that the way I was seeing the world was different than most people, because we all see the world through our own eyes, right? And we hear it through our own ears, and we think that's the way other people are perceiving things. And um, at the time, I hadn't really become aware of my own nature as a psychic or an empath, and so I would hear something in a conversation with a person, and I would say what I heard, tell them what I was seeing, even if they hadn't said it with their words. And so, like most of the time, they would be like, "Oh my God, that's amazing," and then there's those other times when they would be like, "Leave me alone. You're not supposed to know that." And so I really believe when we become conscious that there's this other layer of information available to us, that we actually claim a whole different level of power than just those five senses that we're taught are the end all be all. And when we start working with energy and, you know, being conscious that we can influence it, like we really do transform our lives. We really do make a big difference in our lives just by acknowledging it, and then beginning to use, like, consciously use some, I use like the word visualization, but imagination is a better word, using our imagination to really hold the space of our energy so that we have better boundaries. And even that old way of being for me lacked a lot of boundaries because I'd get in the other person's space without their permission, and then they would react in a way which either would make them want to be closer to me or push me away. And so, you know, transforming your life through energy basically is the way I'm saying, is like when you become conscious of it and start working with it, you can really make a difference in your life. And it's an ongoing process. It's a lifelong journey.
Oh yeah, that is so interesting that that this place of transformation, this place of vitality, and this place of our best selves are all housed in this word that we call energy. And the embodied archetype, it it has to do with this place that is beyond words. It's the Sufis that dance in the spiral, and when they're done spiraling, that is the experience. And trying to translate it can be either very tough and sometimes even counterproductive. So I'm curious, when you were following this piece and ended up meeting this mentor, I'm curious about that process of being of that discovery, of that
Mm.
finding, of that thread that led you to that person. And I know it was so long ago that it might be a bit fuzzy, but I'm wondering if you kind of sat with that, if there's a way to describe that pull and that journey that led you to your teacher.
Well, yes, actually, at that time, like if I sort of look at the previous 6 months in my life before that came about, in the fall of the previous year, I'd started taking an African dance class, and I was getting back into my body after having sort of abandoned it for a while in a challenging marriage. And I and through getting into my body and started feeling myself again, I started realizing that I needed what I needed in my relationship, that wasn't happening, and what was harming me in our relationship, because there was a lot of verbal abuse and such. And so then I stepped into saying, hey, I need this, from my partner, and this is what's happening for me. And it ended up leading to a separation. And while I was separated, um, I was staying with a dear friend, and I had a dream of Don Eagle. And I had seen her photo at my friend's house, but I'm not the kind of person that usually has a dream that then means something that changes my life or whatever. That's like pretty much the only time I can ever imagine that has happened for me. Even though I've had lots of dreams, I woke up in the middle of the night from this dream that was so impactful that it woke me up. And I snuck into the bathroom because I was sleeping in her living room, and it was in a small 1-bedroom place while I was going through my separation, and wrote down the dream and was like, I need to meet this person. I don't know why. I just do. And when I in retrospect, looking back, I realized that we had a healing agreement. We had a soul contract, and it was up. The universe said it's time. And I was actually nervous. I didn't really trust her because I was anti-guru and sort of anti-religion, or whatever. And yet my own intuition overrode my fear, and I just said, I got to do this. It was too, it just felt so strong that I needed to find out one way or another and show up and meet this person. And when I did, I realized that she was far from a person that was trying to tell me what to believe or do, but she had really held space for my own healing and to help me see what was really who I really am, and sort of peel away those layers of who I was being to please other people in my life. So that's what led me to her.
There was a phrase in there that I found myself writing down because it was really interesting and insightful and powerful, and I just want to bring it to the surface, is that your intuition overrode the fear.
Hmm.
And I'm curious if there's a way I don't know if it's if it feels like it's something that lives in a certain part of your body, or if there's something that you're hearing or you're seeing. I know that there's different types of like there's clairaudience for hearing, there's
Yes.
clairvoyance for seeing. I'm wondering, when you experience intuition, where does that feeling come from?
Well, when I first started experiencing it, the first way I experienced it was feeling it in my body. Like and I just had a knowing and I felt it in my body. It wasn't it, but through training later, I learned how to see it and be clairvoyant so that it wasn't affecting my body so much. Because my experience is actually that I believe now, after all these years of working with it, that our nervous system is actually our sixth sense. It's not, it takes all of the five senses information, our physical senses information, plus it's measuring the energy that's happening around us. So our nervous system is feeling the energy from the earth. It's feeling the energy from other people we're interacting with. And that is being read, and you can read information that's not shown with the five senses. It's people aren't there's they might be smiling, they might be saying certain words, but actually the energy is much different than the words or the external representation of what's going on with them. And when you're when you're empathic, or you're often, that nervous system sort of takes on the energy of what you're encountering, and then you start confusing it for your own, and then it causes anxiety and stress because your body's going, what's going on? I feel angry, I feel sad. But you don't actually feel angry and sad, you're just processing the angry and sad of all the people around you, and you don't know that you're not. And so I really feel that the nervous system is the organ of our sixth sense. And that's where we're getting the information from. It's taking all of those five senses information, plus it's measuring the energy coming from that which is around us.
That's beautiful. And I know that that's a lot of the work you do, is helping people that feel overwhelmed by what they're receiving, that they need some tools to be able to create their own boundaries, create their own sense of autonomy, and be able to use that amazing skill when it's appropriate, and also be able to put a pause on it and put a break on it and put boundaries around it when necessary. And so I think that's a really insightful way of looking at and considering the types of tools that could be helpful. And I also love and this aspect of you that came out in that answer, which is all these different ways that your life has transformed. I mean, we talked about that at the beginning. Your invitation is to just transform, and we talked about that moment where you met your mentor and felt called to connect with her, and we talked about the marriage you were in at the time, but there was also this entirely different career you were in, that was using a totally different part of your ways of analyzing and understanding the world. And I think one of the places that really comes out in the way that you work with people is that you really encourage people to take what's useful to them and leave the rest. And so I'm curious, what is it that you think? Because when you said the organ of the sixth sense is the nervous system, it led me to this part of you that I know is in there, of this more scientific way of thinking, this way of mapping the world. And I'm curious how you find that balance with this stepping into this place of embodiment and sharing that with people.
That's a great question. You know, I feel that, I went right out of studying international affairs into working for a satellite imaging company, but when they were first um, allowing commercial satellites to take images and share them with all of us. And so I was working with a lot of former spooks that had jobs where they couldn't go home and tell their partners about it. And they were just so excited about it. And it was like pre what we call a startup. Nobody was talking startup back then, but we were sitting around with boxes, eating on the floor, eating pizza in meetings. It was basically a startup because it was taking an existing way of doing things that only the secret government folks could use and making it open to the world. That's why we all get to have Google Maps, because they get free data from the government, and it could create this, right? So the precursor to all that, it was a really fun. I love that work. I love the teamwork. I love the relational component of my work. I loved the fact that maps are one of the original languages, like before we could even speak the same languages between tribes. When people were trading, they were drawing with a stick in the dirt maps. There's the river. This is where we live. Here's how to get there. Like, this is the most primitive and most purposeful human language, really, I think, for survival. And it's also really, it's also a way of better understanding the planet that we live on and its resources. So yes, I love that world. I think you're talking about it, but also I'm not a huge fan of corporate culture in our country. So there's this sort of dance between, I wanted to find a more meaningful life and be fulfilled in certain ways. And while I love that work, I also I love being able to help people heal and have different experiences. And going back to taking what's useful, sometimes we can only have, I like to use this word have, let ourselves receive a little bit of what we're asking for. So when we are introducing a new concept, it is like, I will take that part of it because that part of it I feel comfortable with. And once I get used to that, maybe I'll take another little nibble of it. And so taking what useful can just be like, this is useful forever, and nothing else about that conversation or a bit of information is useful for me forever. But most of the time, taking what's useful from a situation where you're learning is like allowing you to begin that transformational process, allowing you to see someone else's perspective, allowing you to have more, have a bigger perspective in terms of the directions you're looking, like what you can actually see is possible in the universe. So um that's my perspective on it. I love using both my analytical mind and my intuitive mind because they both have a place. They both have a really valuable place, and that's why that career worked for me, and this one does too. So
Well, and what was interesting was in the middle of that, you talked about, maps being one of the oldest languages, um,
mhm,
and maps of the planet being super fascinating. And it made
mhm.
me wonder, along these lines of understanding that we as humans are nature, Earth is our home. Um, we came from the stuff that is Earth. When you do your embodiment work, do you feel like you're somehow mapping something within people's either intuition or body or anything? Is there a sense that there's mapping going on there?
Yeah, now that you say that, I do feel like that I'm looking at patterns. And when I was, and what this conversation has made me think of is that before we could get above the earth and look down on it, we couldn't really see the patterns of what our impact was. With these satellites, which can see huge patterns, huge swaths, you're going, wow, look at the effect of humans on this planet, or look at the pattern that's happening here. And when I'm looking at someone, when I'm in a reading state and I'm looking at what I call their soul's memories or the history of their soul's experience, I'm looking at patterns that are limiting. So I mean, I could look at non-limiting patterns just so we could have fun together for an hour, but usually people want to actually clear stuff that's in their way of having more of what they want. And so I'm looking for, when they're sharing a little bit about something that's happening in their life that either they're unclear about or they're struggling with, I'm looking at whatever the limiting pattern is. And that pattern could be multi-generational in their spiritual genetic inheritance or their actual like DNA, right? That pattern could be um, more personal to their own soul's experience, or it could be more familial in how it's been passed down. But yes, it's in a way I'm mapping the patterns so I can find the spots that are broken that are congested or limited in the pattern, or that are repeating a pattern that's causing harm, and help them release the energy on it so that it doesn't keep repeating itself.
I imagine, yeah, seeing places where there's maybe a blockage, like there's a roadblock on the map, or like a car accident that happened over here. Or like I'm imagining these kind of GPS little descriptions being used and how you're navigating what you're seeing within people's auras. And it brings me back to this other connection that you have, this land, this farm that you grow lavender on. And I know that you had this amazing kind of synchronicity of timing, that when 2020 arrived with all of its changes, you already had plans to plant and begin and establish this amazing lavender farm that I got to walk through and feel and crunch my feet over. And I'm curious, as you're mapping that out, and you're living in that style of being with the earth in that way, how does that feel like an embodied practice for you?
Well, to sort of connect it with what we were just talking about, one of the pieces that really transformed my life when I was working in business and I was struggling to have energetic boundaries with the impact of people's, well, there's a lot of power plays that happen in the corporate world, right? And so people benefit from hooking into other people's energy and directing it and redirecting it. And the way that I began to have a personal shift is I started using some visualization tools to set my energy before I'd go to work. I would ground my energy into the earth every single day. I would visualize a connection between the base of my spine going down into the earth and really anchoring in there to trust that I had the earth support. So this is like the primary first step of all of my energy work. Always is, we got to have a foundation, and really our mother, our what allows us to be alive here and now is this planet we're living on. And it wants us to connect with it. It wants us um it wants to support us. It's just waiting for us to ask. So, that to me is part of the process, is really like getting your body grounded into the earth and being present for that.
You're tying in these tools that you already were using when you didn't have, the physical tangible farm to place your hands in the dirt, but you were
Mhm.
using tools that both energetically and symbolically and visually uh, had that practice for you.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The farm. So bring that forward into now, which is when I bought this property, I really knew it needed a healing. It was run down. Um, it was neglected, and it had some sort of patterns involved in the way that farming had been done that were, I felt, sort of toxic. And it was just the way things were being done. And so um my personal journey was to observe that, to say, let's stop, stop. I'm ending these agreements with the folks that were farming the land, and for the previous owner, and find a path forward to living in more harmony, knowing that I was observing what was happening around me. I believed I needed to take time to get to know what was happening in all the seasons before I made any major decisions. And I noticed, well, there's a lot of deer that come through here, and I don't really want to fence off a lot of my property to keep the deer out in order to farm. This is their, we're in their space basically. And there's bees that are, like trying to have, like, find food without being toxified by whether it's, the way that people are modern farming. There's a lot of chemicals involved, and I was just reflecting on that. And that's what led me to the desire to plant lavender, because the bees love it and the deer won't eat it. In fact, rodents aren't interested in it. So, and we have plenty of rodents out here. I mean, they'll dig around and pull one down like Bugs Bunny so they can pop out of the hole, but they don't actually eat it, because it's actually a plant that's plant medicine, right? So and it's also a way to create community. So what I've discovered, I didn't realize that part of it when I first planted it, is that I would be putting something in the ground that would attract people to me like bees to honey. And because of the pandemic, and I had put this first field of 400 plants in, and I was out working in it a lot, sitting on the ground and working, people would walk by. There was lots of people that walked by my farm because I'm just outside the city limits, and they could leave their suburbs and take a long walk through farmland. And they would stop and say, "What are you growing?" And, "Oh my gosh, I can't wait till the flowers bloom." And lavender, and everybody was just so excited that it was going to be lavender, and over and over people would see, "I rode my bike by here and I took the long way so I could smell the lavender." It created community connections, and it was just like these extra benefits of like creating beauty, considering planting medicine, and planting something that actually allows nature to have a home in it. The only thing I don't like having a home in my lavender field is the red ants, because they kill the plants. So that's the only thing that causes problems. But other than that, everything else is, we're, pretty symbiotic with it right now.
So yeah, I hear a lot of real beauty there in all of these different relationships that you found by observing first, and then noticing what people and animals were responding to. And so a term that I really like to use a lot and ask people about in these interviews is this idea of reciprocal relationships. And I know, earlier we were talking about how to place boundaries if you need those. What about kind of this other side around how do you have reciprocity, and do the two connect, or are they separate things?
Mm, I love that because I grew up on a farm or ranch. My dad would hate if I said farm because he's a rancher. He's got animals, and he's got Douglas fir timber in the coastal mountains of Oregon, and it's a multi-generational ranch, and it's a lot of work. It's 24/7. He's in his mid 70s and he's still working 24/7, like he doesn't take a day off. And it's his life and he likes it. And when I was leaving my corporate career and working on my healing work and reflecting on those days when I worked in business and would just overwork, coming from a ranching family, it's workaholism is natural. It's like the way to be. And I really wanted to create a balance in my life here. And even having a farm is always a lot of work. It's a lot of work, particularly there's this one that was so run down. But in that choice of reciprocity, part of the reason I chose to plant lavender was because I knew it would give back to me by looking out my window and seeing this beauty. And what I didn't know, which is what I've learned, is that sitting in the field or bending over in the field, trimming plants, doing the work, harvesting, weeding, the smell of the lavender gives back so much. It's a reciprocity relationship for sure, because even if it's not blooming, the actual greens of the plant have that same oil in them. And so you're getting this very relaxing, really soothing scent whenever you're working in the fields. And it's really wonderful, actually. It's like, oh, this is work, but I'm also getting something back from it in the moment.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So that tending that you have for the lavender, you do feel like it is this being that is expressing itself, and particularly through scent, and its gift through that. And I'm curious, kind of to continue to try to paint this map of the work that you do with the empath work and the healing work and the farming work. Is I'm curious, what comes to mind in this moment is I have a dear elder friend in my life who talks about that the relationship with nature is the most honest relationship we will ever have.
Mhm.
And I'm curious, when it comes to this work that you do with the empath work, where you're teaching people how to have boundaries, w- is there a time, is there a place where this knowledge that you have, this embodied experience that you have with being reciprocal with the land, comes into play, even if you're teaching boundaries?
Hmm. That's a wonderful question. I'm gonna have to think about that for a minute because, well, actually, the first thought that came to mind, which was sort of funny, it sounds sort of random, but I thought to myself, if you're not really in your body and paying attention to what's around you, and you're walking through the forest, the tree, like a branch sticking out from a tree, could just poke you in the eye, right? Because you're not paying attention to its space, right? And you're expecting it to move for you, right? Instead of you being conscious and moving for it, because it's a tree. So I don't know if that sounds very, I don't know if that's a very good analogy, but that's what came into my mind when you asked that question. Like, plants take up a specific amount of space, and if we plant them too close together, they don't thrive. Um, and if we cut their roots off because they're in the way of something we want to do, it'll cause them harm. Like, oh, let me cut the roots off the side of this tree because it's in the way of something I want to do. And that they'll recover often, but it will harm them. So but having boundaries, I don't know, and the nature, I guess nature can be a pretty harsh teacher, right? Because it needs things a certain way, and it's gonna, like last year, it froze on the summer solstice, and all of our lavender plants were spiking, and they were growing like a quarter to half an inch a day, and that's the spiking process when they go up and they're getting ready to flower. And so all the tops of my whole 1,700 plant field, um, all just died. No flowers. Like, it killed the flowers, and it killed the spikes. And then the older field that was 400 plants, that's right in front of my house, had some tree shade, so that tree actually protected some of the plants from a freeze. So, like, half of those plants had to be trimmed extensively to. So what we did is, in a hurry, like, not we research, called all the other farmers and said, what's going on, what should we do? And none of them had ever experienced this before. It was in Central Oregon. It never happened ever in anybody's recollection. And so we just took a chance and went with our intuition. My partner's a really intuitive plant person. He can feel a plant's pain. He knows if it needs water, even if I don't. Like, he's really tuned into a plant's energy, and he's like, "This is what we do," and we trimmed back all the plants as if it was the end of the season, and they all grew. They sent up more spikes, and we had an entire harvest that was twice as much as we had planned, about 6 weeks, 8 weeks late. So we still had lavender blooming in October, when usually the peak bloom is late July. So listening to your intuition, I don't know, dealing with responding to nature's requests of you isn't always fun, but you don't have to just necessarily surrender to no hope. I was hopeless for about 48 hours. And then I said, get over it, Natalie, and get to work. So that's that's what comes to mind.
Yeah, the what that story seems to illustrate to me is this idea that part of, not only in a reciprocal relationship is it about giving and taking, but it's acknowledging how that giving and taking is going to look differently based on essentially the gifts that you have. In this case, it's like plant and human, and the differences of the gifts are going to be pretty extreme, and in that sense. But even what you said with this amazing experience that you had with getting like double the amount of productivity out of the plants in this particular unusual season, it was a risk. It was a gamble because of the unknown. But it felt like an honoring of your partner really dialing in to the senses he has as a human, to try to really listen in a way that you can listen to a plant, which of course is different than how you can listen to a human. But it really sounds like a huge piece of this reciprocity is about honoring the different ways of communication within a relationship to be able to truly be reciprocal.
It's true. And when in terms of the relationship with the plants, we left some plants without trimming them back just as an experiment. And, those plants had a harder year, actually. It looked like they really weren't as happy. But the ones that we actually took the time to each, tend to every single one of them, they really thrived. So listening to what is true in the moment rather than, reflecting on what's happened in the past, or just really listening to what's truly happening in the moment is really important in all of our relationships, and responding to it.
Yeah, I love that, this conversation has really emphasized all of these amazing, what I call superpowers of the embodiment type, these amazing gifts and ways of experiencing the world and offerings to the world. And one of the other things that I like to acknowledge is that, every type also has its shadow sides. We all have our challenges. We have our blind spots. We have the places where we get frustrated or we need other support in order to handle. And this is where I'd like to just take a moment to hear what your thoughts are around a few of those. And the one that seems to be kind of calling to me as I'm looking at the list here is something that I think uh, is used as a caution and sometimes even an accusation when we talk about the embodiment type, is that sometimes what can happen is this idea of sidestepping responsibility.
Hmm.
Maybe there's a bypassing that happens or a passive aggressiveness that happens. And I'm curious if that's something that you've had to deal with, or is it something that you help people that you work with deal with? Or do you think it's a bunch of baloney and it's not something that's actually true?
Well, when I was reflecting on that before our call, I noticed that my sidestep is that I avoid conflict. And as a peacemaker and a healer, I want to heal something. And sometimes in the healing process, you actually have to confront what's not working. And so what happens in that sense for me is that I don't speak up on polarized political or environmental issues because I don't want the conflict. It's not because I don't have beliefs about them. I mean, heck, I was on the front page of the newspaper in college for Earth Day with my big Earth flag, but sometime between being a teenager and, being indoctrinated by the business world, I would say, I decided that it was safer to not jump into polarized conversations. Unless it's with somebody but I have a personal relationship with, I'm happy to converse about it, but I don't put it on social media. I don't do any of that. And I feel guilty about that, actually. I feel sort of some shame about it, honestly, because I'm like, well, I have all these beliefs, but I don't want to deal with the people that are going to comment on my post and deal with all their negative energy. So I just don't, you know I live my life. I've always felt like living is the best example in a certain way, but I also, that my shadow side is that I fail to speak up enough um on important issues because I don't want to have the conflict with the person. I don't want to deal with that negative energy that they'll spew my way.
Yeah, and that's hard for a lot of people. It's oftentimes, whether it's political or not, to put yourself out authentically around there. And whenever that happens, it's going to cause some people to respond in a negative way. And I think it freezes a lot of people. Um, and but yes, I think you're right also in calling it out as kind of going back to what you talked about at the beginning about it. Are you going to allow your intuition to override your fear of that or not.
Yeah.
Fear of that
Hmm.
conflict, fear of that negative thing. So I'd be curious to hear this lesson that you've learned about working with the people that you help and learning how to, I guess you could say, instigate conflict. I actually do that on purpose when I'm looking on bringing somebody on as a potential partner on something like the films. When I'm talking to potential producers, is I will
Hmm.
purposefully plant a conflict because I want to see how are they going to handle it. I
Yeah.
want to
Oh no, are you
see
going to do
if
that
the
to me? I'm just
no.
It's okay. No, you can if you want. That would be fun.
I mean
Um,
this whole question kind of is really around the shadow
well,
side.
my journey through the work I do in terms of my intuitive awareness has been a journey of neutrality. And that's sort of an interesting journey because in order to sit for someone and let them tell you about some really traumatic experience, really unkind choices they've made, really dark sides of themselves that they want to heal, you can't sit there and go, "Oh, you're a jerk," like you don't sit there in your mind and judge them because you can't help someone you're judging. You just can't. You have to be neutral. And so it's been a huge and wonderful, wonderful part of my own learning through this process to gain more and more neutrality around people's choices and be as unconditional as I can about accepting them for who they are and what they want and what feels right, as long as it's not harming someone else, really. If it's harming someone else, then it starts, it's not that I'm saying I begin to judge it, but there's an intervention that's required, right? That you can't just stand by idly. But if it's a person working on themselves and how they live in the world, um, the more neutral I can be, the more I can help them actually. And so, it's hard to be neutral. It's really hard to be neutral, but I've gotten really good at it. I've gotten really good at it. It's like you would be amazed at some of the things I've heard. And I'm just like, mm-hmm. It's it's never it doesn't even surprise me anymore. So
Well, and what I love about what kind of the circle that we just went through there was looking at the shadow. And when we do take a look at the shadow, what we can find by learning to flex that muscle or learn through the lessons through it is that we get this whole nother level of understanding. Like when I think about one of the things that I think is a superpower of the embodiment type is the ability to facilitate experiences that change values and identity. And by having that experience of you working through that shadow around conflict and bypassing and avoidance, you came out the other side to be able to really hold this place of neutrality, to use it as a strength to facilitate these experiences of change for the people that you work with. And so I think that's the I think the best case scenario with these shadows, and how when we work with them, when we look at them honestly, they have the power to actually feed into our superpowers. And so I think that's a really beautiful example of it.
yeah, and I mean, what that made me think of is that shame really never wins. Like if a person, I'm thinking about getting someone to be motivated to do something different in their relationship with the earth so that the earth can sustain us for longer. If we learned anything from the Catholic Church, shame doesn't work long term. It works short term and it doesn't work long term. But if you want a really healed relationship, you actually have to talk about the needs of both people in the relationship. And in this case, it's the earth and us, right? So what we have needs, and we've been living in life. Our needs are all that matters. And now we need to look at what the earth needs from us. Um, because trying to get someone to change their relationship with shame, it's not either. It usually leads to avoidance. And the reason I thought of that is because of neutrality. We have to, even if a person's abusive to the earth, we have to do our best to stand in neutrality with them for them to actually show up for the conversation. Otherwise, they're going to either be defensive or just not even show up for the conversation, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, it's a powerful thing. It's also, as I'm sure you experienced, a very hard thing to do, a very taxing thing to have that energy and show up in that way. And I really love some of the conversations that happen around this. Like I'm thinking of Adrienne Marie Brown, who wrote Emergent Strategies and Pleasure Activism, and when she talks about issues that are intense, like racism, kind of learning which ones do you feel like you can hold your presence for to truly be of service, and which ones do you think will push you in the wrong places so that it just kind of becomes a disaster for everybody? And so I hear that a lot in what you're saying too, is that reflection of, you've trained yourself to probably have a bigger and bigger capacity to hold that space. But I'm sure also part of the boundary setting is going, okay, that one I can't do. And I just need to be honest about that with both me and the other person.
Oh, for sure. There's certain boundaries I've set with clients. I've had to like let say I can't work with you because of triggery topics. Um and mostly, but it's not even the topic, it's more the energy of the person, that if they show up with a um energy that is costly to me, that it's too costly for me to work with them. Does that make sense? I have really good boundaries with a lot of stuff people bring to the table, but sometimes they come with some pretty intense energies that I have to say no to. It's rare, but it happens.
Yeah. And I find that interesting, kind of bringing us back to this full circle of the embodiment type that, for Adrienne Marie Brown, it may be the language and the spoken word that for her is the thing that it's like, whew, I this is how I'm going to make the choice between being able to help or not. And for you, kind of bringing back to this idea of the embodied sense is kind of the deciding factor for you. And I think that's another really interesting insight into this particular archetype.
Yeah, the effect of the energy on my experience and how what I can continue to offer is really the measure for me. Reciprocity.
That's another actually interesting aspect of reciprocity. We've already kind of explored what is it beyond give and take. It's more the being able to listen to something that's different than you, but then also, oh, I totally lost the thread. Repeat what you said. What was it that you said was the reciprocity there?
Well, I was energetic reciprocity. In any exchange, there is an energetic reciprocity. And if the person that you're having a debate with or conversation with is just there to take my idea, my truth, no flexibility, then it's not reciprocity. It's just somebody preaching that's not willing to listen, you know? And but there is, we reciprocity is of listening, and actually the energy that happens between two people. You don't have to believe them or agree, but you can still actually show up with that reciprocity energy rather than um this. That's what actually, it's a huge thing I miss about our culture. I feel like our culture, when I was growing up, was there was way more space for healthy debate, healthy conversations about differences. And I feel like our culture has in the United States um, has lost that capacity. It's just like we've lost our skill a lot in this culture to have healthy differences and have conversations about them.
Well, in the honor of that reciprocity, we are actually at the end of our time together. It has absolutely flown by. I'm so delighted to just continue our relationship and continuing to deepen into it. And so, one of the things I like to do here at the very end is with all of my friends that I invite to be on this podcast is to ask a final question that kind of twists things a bit and puts the opportunity in your lap when I ask, what's something that you wish I would have asked? What did I forget to mention? What is something that you would like to share that I didn't have at the tip of my tongue?
Well, the thought that comes to mind is I remember being about 10 years old and sneaking away to go lay in one of our cow pastures, and it just like in the grass on with my back on the ground, and how good it felt to feel my back on the earth, to feel that it's like it. I couldn't explain it in these terms when I was 10 years old, but it regulated my nervous system. It gave back to me just laying there in the grass with my back on the ground. And during those times, I would often write poetry to sort of make sense of some of my challenging emotions that I didn't have good words for yet, because my parents had gone through divorce and they were very different personalities and very different belief systems. And so me and my brother were sort of in the middle of, they didn't have conflict, but just figuring out where we fit. And they were both really intense work. They both worked really hard. And so to sneak away and lay down and do nothing and just like receive the earth's energy and try to make sense of my feelings was, I think it was a pivotal life memory and from early in life around my relationship with the earth. And so I just wanted to share that. And because it can be simple, it can be that simple. It can be that simple. And then the other thing we talked about a lot in this conversation is energy. And I know it might sound a little bit woo to some people when we talk energy, but I really believe that we can affect how we feel on a daily basis by practicing an awareness of our energy. And so I just wanted to offer that whoever's listening to your podcast can get a free copy of a little course that I developed, that it's a 10-day practice for, I call it Fresh Energy Fast, for reflecting on where your energy is going each day and noticing where your energy is leaking and stopping those patterns just by being aware of it with some tools. There's an audio, I call it the Beautiful Boundaries visualization, which is like a 5 or 7 minute visualization you can do, and a journal to track where your energy is going, and a cheat sheet on understanding where your energy leaks are happening and how to stop them. And it's free. And you can access it at it's like a biddy ly, Fresh Energy Fast with the code energy to get it for free for listening to this podcast.
Amazing. Yeah. And we'll make sure that that information is in the show notes so that hopefully it's just a click away for everybody to be able to enjoy. And I loved both of those things. The one when you were talking about being 10 years old, like I felt my body just like sink, even though I'm standing up right now through this. Like I felt as if I was horizontal with my back on the ground, and just the way you described it was so, like, I could feel the energy that you were speaking of it as. So I can imagine that this gift that you're sharing with people must also just be so powerful with just the way that you've been able to put words into a way that follows this energetic pattern to help people tune into it. I'm sure is such an amazing gift. So thank you for bringing both of those here to the end of our conversation. Such a delight to have you in my life, Natalie.
Thank you so much, Amber. I appreciate it.
Hey, Earthmate. How did that episode resonate? Did it stretch you, inspire you, or perhaps irk you? I'm here for it, so please reach out. Besides the socials, we have a community to practice with on our website, eartharchetypes.com, where more Earth archetypes can guide your path and become dear friends. A great place to start is the quiz to discover your type. Oh, and on your way, I'd love for you to hit the subscribe button. See you again soon.